You look so beautiful.
Thank you, boss. Thank you. Molweni kuni nonke, nandi intombi yakakubheka okhathide omasobode wena oswabodela udlubu nokhasi mgwaqa wendlule esibayeni ngoba kuvalwe ngamakhanda amadoda mbende mbove njengetolwane boya obuningi obungangenyathi mbokode mbomvu kamagayizi sunduza abesuthu namandebele siqaphe sihle sakhothwa izinyoni zakwakhathide sombeshane makhunga wena wakhunga izimbila emgedeni zaphuma zingenamisila nanamuhla zinawo imisila ngesimanga sikaMakhunga Dolwane Magonondo nandizalwa kandabula omkhwane osigasa sivunda mwelase ngwekazi sayibona imihlambi sayililela bathi xa bewela ngezinyawo thina sawela ngezihlengela ndingumaganga odlomo omadibo yemyem dikhanyiselwa omayise omvungano sonkopho songalo iswaze lihle ozwide. My name is Nonkululeko Anisha Kubheka, and what you just heard is an introduction of my ancestry and the spirits that have brought us all here today. Amako. We have all convened today to have a discussion on the research project I chose to undertake for my honors course on decoloniality, which is centered on Africana thought, discourse, and critique. The topic I chose for my research is titled The Decoloniality of Being and the Indigenous African Knowledge of Burials and Ukuzila, Suppressed Grief During COVID-19. The purpose of this presentation is to reflect on the burial processes during COVID-19 and the impact of the pandemic on ukuzila. The promotion of putting decolonial principles into practice, particularly during the global COVID-19 pandemic, will be highlighted through the views that will be shared by all the participants joining us today, who will each draw from their personal experiences of grief. The discussion will also examine how the COVID-19 restrictions have prompted a need to reevaluate burial processes and administering customary rituals. By looking at the impacts of COVID-19 restrictions, the decolonial principles will be highlighted. The decolonial principles will be highlighted to guide the participants through an understanding of how coloniality is still perpetuated in our present day. I believe that the information I'm trying to gather will be vital for continuous studies on decoloniality, especially where traditions and customs are being suppressed during our mourning periods. I'll start by introducing each participant, then give a brief overview of what the principles of decoloniality entail and the meaning of ukuzila. Today, we are joined by Busisiwe, Gogo Nobantwana Dhlamini, who is a Sangoma, a spiritual counselor and diviner, a writer, a storyteller, and a communications professional. We're also joined by Dzivhuluwani Mulaudzi, who is a royal son of the Ntengwa clan of Venda in South Africa. We also have Cordelia Sikwele, who is a certified life coach, mental health and emotional wellness enthusiast, and a spiritual healer in training. We're also joined by Maureen Maisiri, who is a first-year PhD student in disaster management at the University of the Free State. Joining us as well is Caroline Makumbe, who is an author, social entrepreneur, a human rights advocate for children and youth, and has recently completed her BA honors in sociology with the University of South Africa. So Caroline and I are both students of decoloniality studies at the University of South Africa, though she has completed her studies successfully, where she's obtained her honors in sociology. There's two more participants that I might introduce at a later stage once they actually join us. But let me just proceed to the principles of decoloniality. The principles of decoloniality are broadly categorized into three concepts, which are knowledge, power, and the being. The decolonization of knowledge concerns the free and relatable accessibility to information for intellectual purposes. This availability of and accessibility to knowledge could help in the refinement of indigenous knowledge by redefining how we receive knowledge and how we make use of it. By implication, the availability and accessibility of information for knowledge purposes encourages intellectual discourse and a potential to introduce flexibility to our learning methods as compared to the known rigid and traditional attributes. The decolonization of knowledge serves as a platform to engage in conversation on what knowledge should be and what qualifies as shareable knowledge. In the case of decolonizing power, the phenomenon refers to the dismantling of oppressive systems that favor and encourage white supremacy over the marginalized individuals. One of the established consequences of decolonization of power is its ability to exclude people of color from leadership positions, decision-making processes, and knowledge development opportunity. As for decolonizing the being, this approach hinges on promoting active participation of everyone, and it implies promoting an environment where Black people experience self-worth, development, and a sense of belonging within society. The identity of Abantu has undergone many years of subjugation, and the decoloniality of the being is necessary if Abantu are to be humanized. Ukuzila, which has brought us together today, is a very important process in the African indigenous rights, as this period signifies the transitioning period of the deceased from flesh to spirit. The process of ukuzila is administered after the passing on of someone, where mourning and grief are processed by the family, either through practices such as wearing black, fasting for the release of the deceased spirit to the spiritual realm of the ancestors, or shaving off hair. The element of spirituality plays an important role in the lives of African people, as this is where guidance throughout the course of their lives is sought. While there may be various practices that are administered following the passing on of someone, there are similarities that can be noted amongst most cultural groups. The spirit of Ubuntu becomes most heightened during this period too, as the support of family and the community has proven to be comforting for mourners. Throughout this presentation, our focus will be on how this process has undergone changes since the outbreak of COVID-19, with the possible identification of the impacts that have been confronting mourners. Just a few important points for us to take note of for this session. May I please ask that you all please keep your mics muted and only unmute your mic once you've been given the platform to speak. Please raise your hand if you wish to add a point or comment while someone else might be making their contributions. And may we please keep to a 2-minute time frame when giving a response, as this will also give everyone an equal opportunity to share their inputs. Since this conversation will span over an hour, for those of you who only are restricted to the hour, you're more than welcome to leave once you need to. Please feel free to. And most importantly, I do hope that we may all gain a new perspective from today's engagement. And with that said, we can start with our discussion. So the first question I wish to have answered is whether or not you all believe that African people are still mourning their deceased family members in line with the customs and traditions that are usually followed. Where they aren't, please mention the changes that you might have noted. Anybody?
Okay, I can go first. Okay, so from sorry, I'm going to keep my video off because of my lighting. And just to apologize, my daughter is around. So yeah, if you hear noises, yeah. So I think from my side, I would say, you know, a lot of us as Africans are no longer actually doing the rituals that we used to do before colonialism, you know, because most of us were colonized into Christianity. So Christianity says to you, anything that's not Christianity is not good. So you look at just the way that we used to mourn is actually different from how we now mourn. True, there's some cultures that still practice certain rituals, you know, when people die and stuff. But from a Christian perspective, and I speak from a Christian perspective because I'm a Christian, from a Christian perspective, you know, those kind of rituals are almost taboo because they're not considered in line with Christianity. So because of that, a lot of Christians actually don't practice, you know, ukuzila, you know, because it's not seen as a good thing. But for me personally, I think it's something that actually brings comfort to the family, because death itself is it's a sad event, you know, and it's something that it's really difficult to even understand. You know, you can have, I mean, all of us have lost so many people, but you know, when someone dies, the hurt still comes. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm now used to death. You know, we never get used to death. So for me, I think really, you know, ukuzila helps us somehow find peace and comfort, because you want to know that, you know, when you lose someone that you love, you don't want to think that they're gone forever, like their memories are gone, everything about them is gone. You want to have a piece of them that still remains with you. And I think that's one thing where when you look at our culture as Africans, that's where we differ, you know, from the white culture, or even from some other religions, where, you know, we've got that deep connection to say, even though this person is dead, but they still somehow, there's still a connection. And I think that really, really brings comfort to people. Over to you.
Thank you so much for those insights, Caroline. Thank you so much. I think it's nice that you took it to the element of how it's not something that just went and changed now that there's COVID. It's been changed for a while, and I'm glad that you actually touched on it's not a recent change. The fact that it's not a recent change is already another indication of how it's still a very, very gradual process, even for us to decolonize what has now been transformed or altered, you know, by religions, for instance, whereas these are traditional customs. These are practices that people administer, but now they no longer actually administer these, given that they now have been trumped by other practices. So if there's anyone else who'd like to add or share their input, the floor is yours. We'll go with Cordelia and then Gogo Nobantwana. You can follow afterwards. We raise our hands, not literally. Not.
I can't find my thing. Okay, noted.
It's fine. I'll just keep my eye out for this as well. Cordelia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I feel it's a yes and a no. A lot of traditions and customs have literally been lost over the years. So if they're being practiced half of the time, it's either it's done, you know, halfway, short, or it's just a mixture of a number of things that people decide to pick up and introduce in their families. And it's also unfortunate, or on the no part, it's unfortunate that a lot of the elders do not teach the younger generation. I think it's a thing good to know. This is for adults. You're a child. You cannot be a part of this. And if they happen to pass before they have taught or they have shared the traditions and customs that are done in the family, and then they are no longer done, and whoever comes next decides to mix up whatever was being done and figuring a way to do everything still together. And then there are families that are extremely traditional, and to them, more than anything, keeping their traditions is everything, and keeping the customs that that have been being done in the family since forever going. And apart from the religions and the many changes that have taken place as well, it's a thing of, I don't know, keeping the essence of the family, the essence of the family within the family space. And yeah, so it's both yes and no. I think it's dependent on the families, because I've seen families where Busisiwe no Gogo and the great grandparent who would say, this is how we used to do things, and to see that they still actually doing things the same way that she's always known them to be done. And then you find people where it's like, we actually don't know how things used to be done, so someone remembered that thing, and then we just mixed everything up and we did what we did. But to also remember that our customs are pretty much who we are, and we still pretty much have, I don't know if this is right, but like we have the right to make necessary changes as time goes, understanding that there are certain things we do not have access to that could have been part of customs and all that we do, and then we just make adjustments to fit in those things. Personally, in my family, my dad's side of the family, the funeral cannot happen until certain elders are around. Now we're at a time where there's work, there's so many things happening, and you cannot wait. Either way, things need to move, things need to continue. So I think there are adaptations as well, where we adapt to stuff that is happening around and try to keep the customs, or pretty much just lose them along the way. And
I'm gonna need to try to jump in there, and
okay.
just for time, I'm respecting time more than anything, because we still have like a million more questions to go. But thank you so much, Cordelia. I think you also just went and touched on one of the other questions as well. But I'll point that out once we get to it, with the points that you've raised. So Gogo Nobantwana, and then afterwards Maureen will follow.
Okay. You can hear me still?
Yes, Gogo. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, because I put on my earphones and I wasn't sure if it's still, the sound is still fine. So I've found that there is, and I think someone also touched on it, that it's a yes or no. And on the no side of it, people have gotten to a point, I've observed, and I'm finding that people have gotten to a point where they are questioning a lot of the things that are done around, ukuzila and around isifo. And people, it seems, have gotten to a place where it's become more important that it becomes a personal process rather than a collective, rather than the priority being on how you are mourning for the collective or in the presence of the collective, or how the collective expects you to mourn. I'm finding people are wanting to practice more independence and to actually honor what they are feeling and honor what they are comfortable with. And to also move away from the things that have never really made sense to them, maybe, or things that have made them feel uncomfortable in any way. So I'm finding that a lot of people kind of they are choosing their own comfort and well-being in how they mourn and in how they grieve. And because of that, there are a lot of things that we know to be done that are not usually practiced anymore. So recently, one of the things that happened was and his wife didn't sit on a mattress, and that was her choice. For her, it was, she just didn't feel she wanted to do that. She didn't resonate with that. And the family respected that. She was the wife, and they respected the fact that that was her choice, There's a friend of mine as well. Her mom passed away recently, and they made a decision in the family collectively that they no longer cut hair in their family, because what they picked up in their family, something that kind of like came up to all of them, is that there's been so many like tragic deaths in the family, and they started to ponder on whether it might not be related to the fact that they actually cut their hair, So it's things like that. So it's actually, I think the choice, the personal choice that comes in, and people questioning it, there is some healthy element to it. I don't think it's like a completely like terrible thing. There is some healthy element where people are seeing this, and we've been doing this and doing this and doing this, but there's this pattern that's been happening with the deaths in this family, and let's maybe omit this and do things in another way. So there's a lot of negotiating that people are doing, and I'm finding there's a lot more of that happening. So it's a combination of negotiating what has never really made sense, and also more of honoring themselves, honoring their own well-being, in how they process the passing of that relative.
No, thank you so much. I'll give the platform to Maureen. Well, I call her Momo, so don't be surprised if I switch between Maureen and Momo, guys.
It's okay. So I would like to reiterate and add on to what Code K said, or when she talked about how things are now done differently. And in some cases, we no longer have the elders who usually do the things that used to be done a long time ago. So you find out that in those instances, people just proceed, they don't follow protocol, the traditional protocol and so on. And then you also find that with COVID, there's someone who mentioned that in their family, there's a burial. If someone dies, the burial doesn't happen until a certain group of elders arrives. And now you find out that in the early days of COVID-19, that was not possible. So it means that a death would happen, people were not able to travel intercity and so on. So it means that the burial would have to proceed without those said individuals. So it means that culture was broken for those people who follow those kind of things. And we also discovered that in as much as those things were not done, some families would say, we still need to go and perform a ritual when things are open, because culturally they need to adhere to the things that they believe in. So that is something that I wanted to add on.
No, thank you so much for all your contributions. The nice thing is that you guys are already answering what is the third question. Like, you guys went and moved all the way there, which is great, because it means that you went and you actually engaged thoroughly with what had been presented to you guys through the information that I relayed, and you were able to actually interpret it through your own understanding. So the question that has now briefly been covered, and if there's any additions that you might want to make, is whether any contribution has been made by the, oh no, sorry about that. It's whether what impact has the COVID-19 global pandemic had on ukuzila and knowledge sharing on mourning and indigenous African processes. This is where, it became crucial that you guys actually touched on, the importance of having elders, the importance of why certain elders need to be there, and why certain processes are still being administered and why they aren't, because I was looking to also understand whether the burial practices and the customs of Black communities have actually been impacted by COVID-19, and whether these have been negative and positive. And as Gogo Nobantwana alluded to, the fact that people have moved it from being a collective process to being an individual and very personal process of, this is how I'm getting myself through this, as opposed to who is dictating what should be done. So I'm pretty sure we've covered that question. So we can move right along to the next one, where I'd like to also understand if the transition that has been made from larger funerals to smaller ones, whether this has been a good or a bad indication to how these processes are also administered, where I'd like to understand if the burials or the unveilings in person are more effective, or if they are better online, and if the support system that people still receive is still the same, if it's still as effective in assisting them with their process of ukuzila. Where I'd also like us to also include in those responses whether it's become easier or harder to actually prepare for these funerals, given whichever circumstances you guys might wish to view them from, whether it's from the aspect of having them in person, where it's large numbers or numbers that you can't really regulate, because when people are there, there's no way you're going to turn people away. But at the same time, COVID says, look, try it virtually. And is that working? Have you guys seen that working, for instance? So I'm going to hand the platform over to you guys. I'm not sure who would like to. Okay, I see Dzivhuluwani, Busisiwe. Okay, so in that order for now, and then if at any point any of you would like to also just make any contribution, I'll just note by the show of hands. Over to you, Dzivhuluwani.
Hi everyone. Sorry I was late. Yeah. Okay. Okay. When it comes to the question of whether how can I say, technology has made it easier, right, in terms of going virtual, I strongly disagree. Right. The thing with virtual broadcasting, for you to do it the right way, right, it's very expensive, right? So imagine you are at a funeral. I had a friend whose funeral was on a Facebook Live. That's literally one camera on a phone. You understand? It cannot, nothing. It doesn't show everything, right? And it doesn't necessarily contribute to the process of what is supposed to happen during funerals, right? Because the funeral is not just the burial. In my culture, a funeral, a funeral lasts for about 7 days, you understand? There are certain processes of the funeral or of the burial that happen through the course of that 7 days. So you can't virtually cover all that, right? Which means that everyone who's supposed to be there, who can't and is supposed to take in the digital content, doesn't necessarily get the benefit of the rituals themselves. And no one has enough money to document a whole 7-day funeral. Even that 1-day burial process it's impossible. We are normal human beings. We don't have SABC on our backs to come and have 16 cameras and capture everything and make you kind of feel what you're supposed to feel during the burial process, you understand? So I don't think there's ever going to be a technological contribution that will even be close to giving us I don't want to call this satisfaction because it's a burial, but the comfort of the rituals themselves and being there live. Yeah, my 2 minutes is up. Sorry, I was calculating.
Thank you so much, Dzivu. Over to you, Gogo Nobantwana.
Okay. So in my opinion, firstly, I agree very much, but I don't think that our technology is indeed too weak to really accommodate all of that. I agree from a technological perspective. But from my perspective, and I say this as someone who is, I'm quite a minimalistic person, right? In terms of like sentiment and honoring, you know. And I think that COVID has kind of forced everybody to prioritize what the funeral is actually about, and more importantly, who the funeral is actually about. And I feel that in this time that there's been so many restrictions, it has created space for the families to actually honor, to focus more on honoring the life of the deceased more than accommodating all of the crowds that want to come. And as an African people, we do things collectively. It's important. You know, it takes a village to raise a child. It takes a village to do everything, and that's something that we should never disregard. But when it comes to but on the more positive side, I want to say is that I feel that there has been more of like a zoom in on what is important for this person to be passed over, for this spirit to be passed over accordingly. So certain politics as well, it's not even a fight anymore around the politics, because now there's this condition, there's these restrictions that really do limit some of the opinions and some of the, you know, inkulumo ezigcwalayo makunesifo, you know. So I think it has allowed that kind of like relief in terms of the politics that come up when it comes to when it comes to funerals, and it has opened that space for the actual life, for the life to be honored. And I think from a spiritual perspective, that's important, because it's very important. We need to be very sensitive about how we pass over somebody's spirit. It's important that we make it as peaceful as possible. It's important that we make it as light as possible. And I think that with these restrictions, there has been more of a space for that to be done. I think for me, the sad thing I would say maybe is the part where, especially when it's a person who has passed from COVID, you know, in some instances, you know, and I think some people need that closure. So I think there's certain processes that we would often do as people that have kind of been taken away, which that part can be sad, and that part may impact the closure. But it also does make me question, how healthy is it as well for you know, it makes me question that. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong, but that limitation I know does impact people's closure. But for me, for the most part, I think what I have appreciated about it is the space for people to prioritize that life. You know, even with the decorations that are done for the funeral and the little sentimental things that people do, people now have the space to actually do that for the deceased, because now there's less financial spending on seats and food and accommodation and even at the gravesite, it's more intimate, and the family, the family and the close people are the ones who actually get to view this process happening, and they get to view it in a less chaotic way, you know, where it's not you looking over somebody's head and you falling behind with the convoy, and by the time you get to the burial, half the work has already been done, you know. So I think there has been more, you know, order, and the people, the most important people, that being the deceased and the very close people of the deceased, have been given that space to have that intimate moment, which I think also helps with the closure. So that's my view on the restrictions and what COVID has opened space for, what it has allowed. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I saw Caroline, you also had your hand up. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I think Gogo has touched on some of my points, but maybe just to add on to her points, I think definitely what the restrictions in terms of the numbers for the burial has done is I think and I speak from personal experience that it's actually reduced quite a lot of drama in the families, because we know, especially us as Black people, when it's funerals, it's almost like it's time to start the fight. People now remember things that were done 20 years ago and stuff. So I think really reducing the numbers really does reduce the drama in the family. And I also think that having almost like a hybrid type of burial, for me, I found that it's actually also been beneficial because, it's become so expensive to travel. So you find that when someone dies, for example, like with me, I'm from Zim. So when someone dies, that means I have to either fly or drive there, and the burial might not necessarily be in a city, it might be in the rural areas. So that's additional cost. So you find that when it's being when you've got an opportunity to see it via Facebook Live or however, it makes it easier for people who cannot afford to travel to the funeral, for them to actually feel that they've participated. True, they want, you don't get the sense that you fully participated, but I think just that glimpse of the funeral itself, brings some form of comfort to you. So I think that's been one of the advantages actually of actually having platforms such as Facebook and all of them for funerals. Yeah.
No, thank you so much for that perspective. I think the one thing that we often miss as people sometimes is the fact that our proximity even to the people who pass on is another contributing factor when such deaths even arise. I've noted Cordelia's hand. I see Maureen's hand is up as well. So I'll give Cordelia the platform and then Maureen will follow afterwards.
Guys, thank you. Okay, I'll go a bit more on the negative things that I've realized. Funerals are done in a rush nowadays because of COVID. There is no time, everything is done in a rush, the quicker, the better. And then it's the stretched finances. I feel as much as you won't be having a lot of people to cater for and all those things, but then there's not much time to plan around your finances, because everything is quick. We have to do this as quickly as possible. And then for the ones who are closer to the loved one who has passed on, who actually have to be the ones preparing for the funeral, there's no time for them to deal. At this point, you just have to be a stone. You have to be as strong as possible because you have to get work done. And I feel that for a person's mental and emotional health, it's hectic, because they either get to a point where they don't even have the energy to mourn anymore, or they take on everyone. I don't know how to put it, but they're just frustrated about everything that by the time their funeral has passed, they really don't want to do or be with other people. And I feel the best part is that there aren't a lot of people. I don't know, funerals have become extremely chaotic. And, because of the restrictions, there aren't a lot of people. That means order is able to be maintained. But I feel I think my biggest concern for anyone who has had to do, who has had to bury a loved one during COVID is not having time to process anything, because everything just needs to be done as quickly as possible. Yeah, that's it for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cordelia. Maureen, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. So we have noted with COVID that the funerals have become smaller, right? And is an African population, we value closure, right? that week that you are surrounded by people, and you know there'll be a lot of people coming to check on you, it makes you feel a little bit better. But now if you look at the COVID situation, the funerals are now smaller. You'd find that maybe it will be just the 10 of you trying to organize everything. You are mourning, you're trying to organize. The burden is on the actual people who are close to the deceased that are busy with everything. So I feel like the burden has increased due to COVID, and closure, people are not getting enough closure. Why? Because maybe you'd find that, let's say, for example, it's a mother who has passed away, and the children are in the, maybe they're in the States or so, and now they have to view the funeral via Facebook or a live streaming thing on YouTube or something like that. Those people will be negatively affected. Why? Because they didn't get the chance to travel to be with family. The burial has to be done within 48 hours and so on. So I feel like emotionally, people have been negatively impacted. Financially, COVID funerals, instead of catering for a lot of people, you're catering for a smaller group of people. But the emotional part of grieving is the one that impacts people more than the other things. So yeah, that's my contribution.
Just to add to that, I've just added here where I even went as far as trying to understand what it is that people actually fail to actually process in this period of ukuzila, because while we may make it out to be something that someone processes through the comfort that they get from the people who come during their mourning period, it's what the person is left with after that passing on. It's having to deal with all these emotions that are now only coming in and sweeping in as a wave, because while you're busy with, you know, if arrangements for the actual funeral, you don't really have time to understand what is actually happening inside of you. And I appreciate that you guys touched on that rushed nature, because I look at it more on the emotional as well as the psychological impacts that actually result from all of that. Because while you're stressing about where all the money is going to come from or where you're going to get XYZ, once that has come together, you brush it aside, and now you have to deal with the person. This being that is still here, this being that has not passed yet. You don't take yourself into the instance where you're now 6 feet under with that person. Now, when you look at it from, you know, the perspective of someone who loses someone that they are dependent on, for instance, it becomes a whole dynamic where even the onset of conditions such as prolonged grief disorder might actually result in this person's life, over the fact that they don't get to process this grief now. They put it off up until such a time where, or such a point where it blows up into something else that's completely different to this process that they would have actually had to undergo. So once that actually then erupts, whenever it does, we view it as something different. We don't view it as usazilile lo muntu, noma they didn't get a chance ukuba azile ngendlela, you know. So I'm glad that you guys actually are raising the points that you actually are, and how they actually linking to the fact that it's not just about the fact that we need to get this out the way, but it's what comes with us getting this out the way, you know, what comes with us going through this and actually ensuring that the least that we actually doing, because I'm pretty sure that it's standard for each and every one of us that any person deserves a dignified funeral, and where that cannot be provided for, it's not just the person who gets disgruntled from their grave. It's you guys with your restless spirits as well who get left with that feeling because you choose to carry it as opposed to actually releasing it during this process. So I guess that also highlights the importance of this process, because now you're all bringing all these dynamics into the picture, and each and every one of them actually needs to be processed accordingly. There's nothing that you can say, you'll go through this alone and everything else can wait. No, each and every one of them needs to be unpacked, which now is going to take me to the next question, where I'd now like to find out if you guys then believe that discussions of this nature, whether they actually have the potential to form part of daily discourse, you know, where it could benefit the collective, as you've all mentioned, and how best you think this would be most accessible to the people who need to, you know, be hearing these things, who need to be made aware of these things. Because while we may think that these are things we've noted, there are people who are just going through all these passings and they don't even take any cognizance of the fact that there's so many elements that need to be broken up during this period. So if you guys then have any inputs on how we can then, you know, carry on with such discussions, or how best such discussions can actually reach people, where people actually become, you know, open enough to be involved in them. Because while I would have reached out to each and every one of you personally, do you then believe that other young people would be as open to actually be discussing such topics so openly even? The hands went dead. Where are they?
I'll go. Okay, I'll go.
All right. Caroline will go first, and then Cordelia can follow afterwards.
Okay. So from my end, I think there is definitely an opportunity for us to continue the conversation further. And personally, you know, I'm just seated here listening to everyone, and I'm just realizing, wow, I need to have this conversation even with my own family, you know, because I think these are things that we don't really talk about. I think someone mentioned earlier that, you know, especially like with ukuzila, now we don't have elders who have passed down the information to us. You know, they haven't generated that information to us on how do we actually conduct ukuzila and stuff like that. So I'm actually sitting here right now thinking, if any of my parents were to die, you know, what would they want us to actually do, you know? You know, and those are conversations that I've never had with my parents, and those are conversations that I know, yeah, because they are like very, very, very old school. So yeah, to even get anything out of them, yeah, it's going to be difficult. But I think it's those difficult conversations that we really need to talk about, and it's conversations that we need to also pass down to our children. Because I'm thinking now, and I liked, Nonku, how you opened the discussion, you know, with the what you call it when you do your totem.
Those are my clan names. Those are
yeah,
the four names of my ancestors.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking that's something that I need. That's knowledge that I actually need to pass down to my daughter. You know, my clan, my husband's clan. You know, that's stuff that she needs to know. So I think for me, when we start, and you know me, I'm in child rights. So for me, I always believe that, you know, you start at an early age. So I feel that when we start, if we start educating our children from as young as possible, then it's easier for them to have these conversations, and for them to actually apply them in their own lives, you know. So for me, really, it's about reaching the children as young as possible, and making sure that we continue we embrace, number one, you know, our culture as Africans, because I think that's one thing that's been stolen away from us, that we you know, we don't believe in our identity anymore. So I think that's one thing that we need to get back. We need to embrace our culture and embrace our uniqueness as Africans, and I think through that, then it will become easier for us to then have this conversation. So obviously, I think the hard thing is actually starting the conversation. But I think once you start the conversation, even if you don't get buy-in, I think, in the long run, people will start questioning, because Nonku, in our decoloniality class, that where we were when we started the conversations to where we are now is completely different, because it just opened up your mind, and suddenly you realize, wait a minute, somebody has colonized my mind, somebody has stolen my identity. I don't even know who I am anymore. So I think it's really about bringing back what it means, the essence of what it means to be an African. Yeah. Okay, I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you so much. I think Cordelia was next, and then I've noted Gogo Nobantwana as well afterwards.
Thank you. Well, I'm in agreement with Caroline and a lot that she has said. I feel like she took some of my points. It's okay. I guess we are in one accord. But personally, I feel like this is a great time to have such conversations, especially with everything that is happening, with as many people trying or working hard to return back to self, to their authenticity, and with a lot of families, how do I put this? Coming back together again, how unity is becoming a thing again, how being one is becoming a thing again, and how healing is also becoming a thing, whether as a person alone or as a unit. It's okay, we are healing as a family, because this propels everyone to heal. And I feel in every person, or all the people who would be reached by this are the first people who need to get that healing, so that they can be able to pass it on to their families, to their friends, and to share it with others. But I feel the biggest thing would be the healing that will come with such conversation. The healing will then, it will propel our learning, it will propel ourselves and understanding our family structures, rebuilding our family structures, and the community as a whole again, because it will go far more beyond the individual, their own family.
I think our audio is cutting there.
It would go into the community as a whole as well. So yeah, I feel like they're gonna open doors into healing, except into mental health, emotional. Oh, sorry, can you hear me?
No, we're all good.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we almost lost you there for a bit, but we're hearing you clearly now.
Okay, sorry, it's the network rain has been messy lately.
Yeah.
So I feel like from just this conversation, we've touched into a lot of things. So the openness of spaces of such conversations is actually going to propel more things. We've touched on the physical health, mental health, emotional health, finances, family structure, individualism within the families. And I think it would push for a number of things to now be brought back, to be spoken about, to be dealt with, the healing that will take place, and then the new creation that will take place as well. Because although so many things have been lost already, we have the opportunity to recreate, if I could put it that way. So
Thank you so much, Cordelia. I'm gonna hand over the platform to Gogo Nobantwana, and then Dzivhuluwani will come next.
Okay. I I think in terms of, I think the big, one of the things that really really hits us is the fact that for when it comes to these things, we only start discussing processes around ukufa, when it happens. And there isn't space that we create, and I don't even know if this is possible in the busy world that we live in, and if it's possible in a world where we don't really want to talk about this, we don't want to think about this outside of it happening. We want to pretend that, like, no, this not pretend, but we it's not something that we really want to have that discussion on. So I think, and as a result, we only ever really discuss, all of the different processes around it in terms of emotional health as well, mental health as well, never mind the logistics, everything around it. Everything is only ever really discussed in that moment. And the discussions always kind of like fall short because in that moment, there's very little space for the heart to open up to all of the other conversations that need to happen. And what I think is that in terms of having these kinds of discussions, I think in an ideal world, it's something that every single family should open that kind of forum for. So before we say, let's have these discussions on a collective level, have forums and summits and whatever around them, I think families, it would be amazing if families in themselves created space, had actual gatherings where outside of the actual death happening, there is space for these things to be discussed. You see, in this family, this is the process that happens around, around funerals, around death, around mourning and all of that. And I think also there should be space still within those families. I think in an ideal world, what would be great is that, when those 3 months have passed or those couple of months have passed, and these cuts of Geza, I think Geza should also incorporate the counseling. It should incorporate counseling where space is actually held to speak about the emotional burden or the mental burden that is falling on that particular family or the ones that are most affected. Okay, again, we are following these procedures, but there should also involve, okay, what kind of care do you need? What space are you in? What do you need to release? And it be a moment for the family members to then really hold space, because I think outside of COVID, we've never really had that time to process everything when it comes to death. It's always been a thing of, before 2 weeks is up, So I think maybe we need to, as families, see where we can create spaces now that, and since we are having this discussion, maybe it's something that we can pass over in conversations with our peers, that, maybe we can create a culture where we actually intentionally create spaces where in all of these gatherings that we do as families, there actually be a council on how to hold also that emotional space and that teaching space as well, so that in the event that we've already held that space. We've already made that commitment from the previous conversations we've had. We've already kind of figured out how to ground ourselves from the previous conversations that we've had. And then everything else then can run in a more careful way, in a more open way, and in a more, loving way, based on the fact that you already know that these people that are here, I've had these discussions with them. This is what we've agreed on how we move forward. So I think these conversations, we need to try and bring them into the actual family, because each family has their different rules and their different laws about how things are processed and how certain procedures happen. Before we can say, let's have these conversations out there in the spaces, let's have these conversations inside our families. And then from there, it can be something that we take into other spaces, that in our family we do this, in our culture we do this. Because also what we do as a people, we borrow from each other. We borrow from other cultures, because at the end of the day, we are one. So you might hear that in this particular family, this is done, and this particular culture, this is done. And I think the more external forums should be ones where it's a case of, this is what is done in these particular cultures, this is what is done in these particular traditions, and let's then borrow from each other, bring it back to our family, and then sort it so that it works for that particular family and whatever that particular family's values are. So I think that's how ideally, that's how I think it would be great for the conversations to be had. And that's the fun.
Thank you so much for that contribution. Dzivhuluwani. Dzivu, there we go.
Wow. Well, I'm not sure if I have much of a contribution after what everyone just said. Wow. But like, it was very informative. Yeah, very informative. And that's why I think these conversations, I don't want to say you must find a bigger platform, right? But rather they need to continue and they need to be sparked in other people. I think I had never thought about this until you presented it to me, if I'm being honest. When you presented it to me, it made me think about my own family and my own culture, right? And how I have neglected it without me knowing, you understand? So it helped me once to know more, right? I came to the realization that most of the customs that my family had before adopting Western cultures, they died off because no one was explaining why you had to do this. Right? You just had to do it. So for perfect example being the burials, like there's certain processes that happen that we just know that they have to happen, right? Without reason. So when it becomes convenient for us to neglect those things, we neglect them. We can instantly neglect them because we don't understand the depth, we don't understand what they actually do and what they actually mean, right? So when you presented this to me, it made me want to know more about that, because I started realizing that, no, there's these things that we do and I really don't know why they are happening, you know? And my idea of burial, I would say, is 70% Western. To be honest, it is 70% Western, right? And that's how I've been taught. So in my family, I feel like the elders, they did not teach, they instructed, right? And when conversations like these are sparked, it makes us, the younger people, much more interested, you understand? Because you can, now I have my own reasons of wanting to understand why certain things are done in a certain way. So I think it would really be beneficial if the conversation is brought to a much bigger platform. I would honestly say, from the people that are here, I have learned in the past hour more than I've learned my entire life. You understand? So like, if you are able, if a conversation like this is able to give me this much knowledge in an hour, literally in an hour, I've learned more than I've learned in my entire life. I never understood the grieving process, the way each and every one of you described it, right? And how important it is in our cultures, and how important each element of it in our customs is. I've never thought of it in that way. And then in the past hour, like, my mind has just been blown, you know? So I think it will be beneficial for everyone. Okay, we need to work on how it's gonna be going to more people, because it has to. I believe it has to. I believe it has to. Because the conversation is much bigger, hey? I understand here it's solely focused on the decolonialism of the burial rituals, right? But it's much bigger than that. You know, there's certain things that we need to actually know about enough to spark interest for us to actually want to do them for the right reasons, you know? So yeah, I don't know how to close properly, guys. That's my argument.
So yeah, yeah, Dzivhu. No, thank you so much. I think personally, it was not so much about getting, everyone who's here to be here, but it was because I knew that the versatility, even in each of our experiences, is what would make such a topic even worth discussing, because we are all now opening up, to new perspectives, which is what decoloniality is basically trying to even teach us, where, yes, these are practices that you might know because they have been embedded inside of you, but do you know other practices outside of that? Do you know that you can actually explore or apply other practices that aren't really in line with what, that rigid mentality that we've all, been constricted to? And, just as a side note, even with me personally, I think the effects of decolonization are not always as evident as we might believe or assume them to be, because I'm actually repeating this course where the only thing or the only blunder I made was presenting a paper in a decolonized format, and even with that, that also then went and showed me that you could present exactly what is needed, but the fact that you're still bringing us the Western perspective is what's already taking away from everything that you would have brought to us. So now with having a discussion that's more in line with what I've personally experienced, over these past few years with the losses that I've had, and, in learning how there's so many ways of going through ukuzila. There's so many things that even come with ukuzila, even besides the processes that have been narrowed down to you as a person, because everything else that you feel outside of what's been dictated to you cannot, be experienced by someone else. And I think each and every one of your experiences has been a very great contribution even to my own understanding of ukuzila, because it's broadened my interest personally to now want to understand, different things about ukuzila, to now want to actually share more with people on ukuzila. But now, as most of you then went and noted, that we can't then take that to the people if it's not reaching the people that are immediately here, with us, which is why it's good that each and every one of you, actually honored this invitation, because you guys are equally contributors to, whatever processes that I've been going through, where even without those processes just being narrowed down to ukuzila, but you guys have been there, even in that is the essence of ukusebenza kobuntu, because it's who you guys always choose to be. It's who you guys acknowledge yourself as. So I hope that this gratitude that I'm trying to extend to you guys will be more far-reaching than my words. And just on a last note, I felt, since Caroline actually mentioned with the beauty of the introduction of this presentation, I figured, even the end needs to hit an equally high note. So at some point during our course, this decoloniality course, we were actually asked to express how the demonization that African spiritual practices of healing have undergone, and how this has actually gone and impacted us. And I wrote a piece titled "The Struggle That Still Emanates from My Name." So my name, Nonkululeko, means freedom. And I believe I was not just named Nonkululeko just for the sake of liberating all these ideas or thoughts or expressions, but to actually have people who come into the space that I'm in equally get a sense of, that liberation, whatever it is that they need to set free within them, within themselves, they should be more than comfortable to do so as long as they're in my space. So I'm very grateful that each and every one of you actually embraced that. So the struggle that still emanates from my name. Born just a day after the first anniversary of the release of the man said to be the liberator of the oppressed, has me still feeling like my own liberation is still only buried within the confines of my name, Nonkululeko. As this freedom and peace is but a fantasy I have not lived to see, yet only continue to see bound by the shackles of only being fluent in the language of the oppressors, while my own mother tongue was never breastfed to me, as my parents concerned themselves with raising a child that could fit into the system rather than to raise one who could have more embrace of their own cultural identity. Going through years of a questionable identity has only seen my adulthood experience being strained by the consequences of my parents' ill-informed choices, where I have now found myself finding more solace in tracking my ancestry through the dreams that once seemed to be a haunting experience, gradually becoming understood as communications from the spirits that still walk within and besides me on this earth, where the failure of pharmaceutical medications revealed that my healing would only stem from the beads and protective strings that needed to be strung around my waist, wrists, and ankles, a practice which the colonizers still deem as a barbaric display of witchcraft. I have learned that my upbringing became too Eurocentricized when I began to find my footing into my Africanness. It felt like a return to a home I had longed so tirelessly for, a home I wish many will someday return to in order to bring the true healing that we keep seeking, the healing of a gravely distorted being that cannot identify with self outside of the construct that has been tailored to have them fit in, rather than to always seek to stand out and stand up for all they were through their forefathers, all they are, and all they were destined to be. A people of Africa that may live to someday enjoy Nkululeko. So I would like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to share all your views on ukuzila during COVID-19. And I'm very grateful that you were all able to extend these views, not just for this period of COVID-19, but looking at them from way before the onset of this pandemic. I can only hope that this information can extend to others who are also processing their grief and mourning the losses from the past few years. I pray that you may all stay blessed, where light, peace, and life always find their way to each and every one of you. Kamaku. So if there's any contributions that you guys would like to make now, you're more than welcome to do so. Anybody there?
Can I speak? Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I'm gonna shut up. I didn't raise my hand.
I can hear someone. Okay, no, go ahead. You're already on the floor.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't raise my hand. Nonkululeko, thank you. Thank you for this really amazing space. I think even before, I think it's been, you gave us a mental journey even before the actual conversation. And I'm pretty sure everyone else as well, you made us think about this particular topic in a way that we may not have thought of thinking about it before, you know? So thank you for opening that space in our hearts and our minds, first of all, and then thank you for putting together this lovely group of people. And thank you to everybody here who also shared their insights and their experiences. And I'm really grateful that we all did it in such a respectful way. And yeah, I think after this is definitely something that I'm going to take with me and just really reflect on even more, you know, with myself, and actually I feel I will take this conversation further in my own personal capacity with the people in my circle. So, siyabonga Kubheka, and all the best with your research. Please share it with us when the time allows. And yeah, anything else that you may need for the paper, please feel free to reach out. Thank you to all of you, and thank you to you and to those you work with who have also used you for this purpose. Thank you.
I noted Dzivhuluwani and Maureen also had their hands raised. So see, you can take center stage.
No, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you, Nonkululeko, for giving us a brain teaser, more than a brain teaser though, life-changing questions, I'd say. And thank you for everyone for sharing your opinions. Nonkululeko will tell you, I'm a very visual person. So when you guys were speaking, I was making movies in my head, and really, wow, this was one hell of an exciting movie. Yeah, and all the best with your research, and please share it. I know you don't like sharing things, I don't know why, but like, please this time share it when you're done so that we can share it with, this is the beginning of how we're gonna share it to the world, right? Please share it to us so that we can share it with other people, right? So that they can get what we got in this little hour from your research, okay? Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Definitely, guys. I as soon as all the formal procedures are done, I think you guys should be at liberty to also be able to go back to, everything that was shared today and possibly beyond today. So, Maureen, I think you're next up.
All right. Thank you so much, Nonkululeko, for the discussion that we had today. It was quite eye-opening, and it made me look at things from a different perspective, to actually think of what we can do as families, mostly the things that we need to address at family level. So it was really, really good. And thank you so much for choosing an insightful topic. And thanks to everyone who participated, for sharing and giving contributions. I learned a lot. So all the best with your research. And like I always say, if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. So all the best with your studies, and take care.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm just noting here, even from Cordelia and Caroline. Hey, weather, guys. You see, the thing about technology is that it's so unpredictable. And just when, we're all getting all geared up and it just wants to come in and interrupt us. But thank you all so much. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the spirits that have allowed me to be in your presence today. I truly appreciate it. And I'm wishing you all the best, each and every one of you, in your personal endeavors as well. And I hope that whatever you will be taking from today will truly make quite a beneficial difference, not only in your lives, but in the lives of those that are closest to you, in the lives of those you encounter. And I hope that all this knowledge may also be able to reach them as it has reached and touched me in the same sense. Thank you all so much, and goodbye.